Is D&D's 2024 rules revisions a bust? Or are reports of its underperformance exaggerated?
You want answers! I want the truth!
One of the big ongoing debates in TTRPG land is the performance of Dungeons & Dragons, or more specifically, the new updates to 5th edition that rolled out with the new Player's Handbook last year. Depending on who you talk to, the 2024 version of 5e is either moderately successful or an absolute turd that was DOA. Now, some of the talk surrounding the new but not new edition of D&D has nothing to do with the actual rulebooks itself. For example, Polygon this week wrote about how there was an opportunity for indie publishers to have a bigger impact in the TTRPG sphere because the dragon was wounded. But most of the reasons pointed to in that article had to do with Hasbro's weird decisions regarding things like the OGL, D&D Beyond, and other stuff rather than the actual game itself. Business decisions, not the game. Now, there was some talk about D&D's less than exciting lineup this year, but that's honestly because the Monster Manual got pushed back into 2025 due to delays in playtesting because of the OGL, and that seems to have thrown everything off by a bit in terms of future releases. On the flip side, press were treated to a presentation about the 2025 Monster Manual a couple of weeks ago, which included a presentation on the performance of the 2024 rules revisions to date. Per Jess Lanzillo, one of the leaders of the overall D&D brand, the English version of the 2024 Player's Handbook reached more players' hands in just 4 months versus what the 2014 Player's Handbook did across all language versions. That sounds really, really darn impressive until you realize that back when the 2014 Player's Handbook came out, everyone thought that D&D was dying. That was before the actual play explosion, followed by the Stranger Thing explosion, followed by the Big Bang Theory explosion. I forget in which order those all went, but that's before D&D went mainstream. Additionally, according to Lanzillo, 3.6 million characters have been made on D&D Beyond using the 2024 rules revisions. That sounds impressive, until you remember that there are over 19 million registered users on D&D Beyond. That means that less than 20% of its registered users are using the 2024 rules, and that assumes that every character belongs to a separate user, which seems next to impossible given how people tend to just spam character building all day long on that site. So what's the actual truth here? As someone who routinely talks to retailers, to players, and to people at Wizards of the Coast, the answer is that the new D&D edition is doing just fine. We don't have any hard numbers. Wizards keeps those incredibly close to their chest, but we haven't talked to a single retailer, and we have regular contact with about 24 or so of them, that have been surprised by D&D's underperformance. Now, we haven't heard a single one of them say that we have a ton of players' handbooks just sitting on the shelves collecting dust. However, we also haven't talked to anyone who has said that they can't keep the player's handbook on the shelf either. It seems to be doing just fine. In terms of the players that we talk to a fair number, and of course this is all anecdotally, but the players that we talk to seem to be gradually shifting to the new rules at a more casual pace that lines up with their old campaigns ending and new ones beginning. The reality is here that D&D has kind of a silent majority now. It's such a large game with such a large user base that there are just a lot more casual players that are almost entirely disconnected from the day-to-day of D&D, which means that they probably don't even know that there is a new player's handbook to use. I spoke with a person a few weeks ago who literally plays Dungeons & Dragons every single week, and they thought that the Spelljammer books were brand new. And those books came out like a week after I started my last D&D YouTube channel. Anyways, if you really want to know how the D&D edition is actually performing, the next big bellwether will be at Hasbro's investor call, which will be taking place sometime in the next month or so. If the Player's Handbook and other 2024 rulebooks are overperforming, Hasbro will be crowing about it. If not, D&D will barely get a mention, and I'll be honest, D&D usually gets nothing more than a mention at those calls unless they're talking about the bags of money Baldur's Gate 3 made. For reference, I don't think that Hasbro's CEO mentioned the 2024 rulebooks at all during the last year's phone calls, other than maybe one mentioned that it was part of their 50th anniversary plans. It just wasn't something that really seemed to be on the radar for the C-suite people at Hasbro. Anyways, do you think that the 2024 edition of D&D is overperforming, underperforming, or doing just okay? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Above the Table.